Cameron writes, I'm fascinated by the idea of whether there is truly a ceiling to human potential in hard climbing. Drew Rawana talked about V18 being near the limit of human potential and mentioned that it would likely come in the form of more endurance-oriented boulders, for example, V15 into V16 with virtually no rest, rather than something featuring a V17 or V18 move or sequence. What is Aidan's view on whether there is a ceiling to how hard humans can climb?
Yeah, no, that's an interesting question. I think we're so far away from it, not in like a pessimistic way, in like quite an inspired way, I guess. Interesting in terms of Drew's idea on human potential being not that far away. I guess like V17 is kind of like relatively established to exist these days to a certain degree. Like I feel like most people would be pretty confident that something like Burden would be that. So upon finishing Alphane or working on Alphane, I did quite a lot of like mental training with Hazel Finley. A lot of that was just working on like preparation of the state I wanted to be in to be able to execute well. Initially, my initial reaction was like, oh, I probably don't need that. That'll be like, I'm fine kind of thing. I guess it's the same idea of, I mean, I think in the US is pretty good for this, but in the UK, there's a real like, maybe it's an overgeneralization. There's like an idea of like, I'll figure it out on my own kind of thing. And like, you get the same with like therapy. I've had it before as well, where like I've been having times where I've been struggling and people have suggested, oh, maybe you can like get some therapy. And I'll be like, oh, I can figure it out myself kind of thing. Almost as though there's like a reluctance to express some vulnerability or like kind of like, I think it's a bit of a lack of an open mind though. So I kind of caught myself in that same, and I like kind of have challenged that idea myself in the past. So I kind of caught myself in that same loop of being like, no, like the psychology of climbing, I feel like it's all right. I do it okay. I was like, actually, no, I'm going to like catch myself there because obviously it's an interesting field. And I went into it with an open mind and was really impressed by it. Found that like it challenged the way I like maybe my initial preconceptions of certain things which were helpful and definitely felt really helpful for me anyway. With a lot of like work into my mindset and like my mental training for like the state I wanted to be in for performance came like just a lot of reflection on like the power of, and the influence of the mind over the body. And I became really inspired by this idea of like the potential in climbing and like how like for moves to have been done for fitness to not be a limiting factor. Say like the first move on Burden is probably pretty one of the hardest moves out there.
You'd say that's like V13 or V14, just that one move?
Yeah, it's probably an 8. Yeah, it's probably 8B. Yeah, probably around that kind of thing. Okay. It's super hard. It's super hard to know, right? But
right.
Like if you can do like that harder move and it feels like at your absolute limit, were fitness not to be a factor, so like say maybe you have like 10 of those moves back to back, you're not going to really get pumped. Like theoretically, there's a potential for one's body to be able to do that climb from a physical perspective. The key to unlocking that is kind of like governed by the mind. And that really made me like question like how far we had to go. Like as in like, I really thought about this. So I think it might be something we'll talk about later. I worked on the direct version of Alphane. Like there was one move which I think I did most of the moves in my earlier sessions, but there's one move that took me a couple of sessions to do anyway in the middle of it. But like by like about like 4 or 5 sessions in, I'd done like all the moves a few times and like kind of like was reliable on most of the moves apart from like I was reliable on most of the moves, but I'd have never said I was close to doing that climb. Like in my head I was like, this still feels like totally conceptual for me. Like I would never expect to pull on and do this climb or get anywhere near doing it. And yet I know that physically I could do that. Like as in like, yeah, it's possible. Like, and so I think that was like, I think we have a long way to go, even with the physicalities in which we currently have. Like as in like, people are getting better at training. Like personally, I feel like I'm physically getting a lot like stronger. There are people stronger than I, and like people will probably continue to get stronger. But I think even with the physical capabilities we have, we're still a long way from maximizing our potential of what we can do. I don't know where that ceiling would be, but I think it's a lot higher from where we currently are.
Wow. Just to jump in and paint a little more context for people. V20. Nice. Yeah. 9B plus, font 9B plus. That's so insane. What was I going to say? So to paint a little bit more context around that, you mentioned Alphane Direct. It sounds like after doing Alphane, so Alphane kind of comes outward. You start like low in this cave and come out and then trend left. And then it sounds like there's a version of it that comes out and goes right that you were working on that's like kind of a next level project.
Geography of that boulder, it's like a massive like barreled roof. And it's kind of like steepest at the bottom and then it'll get slightly less steep. There's an old like AA that Dave Graham established called the Alphane Moon, named after some sci-fi books I think he likes, which is on the right and kind of like kind of goes straight up and then trends left and then finish. Matty Hong did like a top out to it more recently, that from the very start, Trip to the Moon. Yeah, that was in the Alphane video, I think. And so that really like opened up some things on the boulder. And basically Alphane almost starts like directly below the top out of Trip to the Moon. It's just such a big barrel. Like it's such a long way that by the time you've done the first 3 moves of Alphane, you get to these break lines, which kind of like, it's really obvious to follow left through these these crack lines. So that's what Alphane does. It starts, kind of does the first 3 moves to these break lines and then trends left. But you can do the first kind of 2.5 moves, and then the third move you go to like a much narrower or a much worse hold, and then you match left hand into the hold you would have gone to with your right hand, and then you kind of like trend slightly right, straight up the barrel, and then finish direct. It kind of just goes straight up from the start of Alphane to the top out. And it's really interesting climbing, really complex. I think maybe it's a bit divided in terms of height. There's some sequences which you can use if you're taller, which are kind of a bit of a no-go. I couldn't reach them. I know Sean certainly couldn't reach them. But I think Dave is maybe trying a different method. Giuliano's tried a slightly different method as well. But me and Sean actually, he worked on it a bunch and I worked on it individually, and we ended up having pretty much exactly the same sequence. And it's very complex, lots of like hands flips and like it's kind of really body tensiony, similar to Alphane. It's certainly harder. Like I think I'm pretty confident the moves are harder. I think there's like 14 hard moves on this one, whereas there's 8 hard moves on Alphane. So it's like kind of harder and longer, I guess. So that thing's definitely like pretty futuristic. But well, yeah, it's like futuristic in that like it is really hard. But like it's not futuristic in that like all the moves have been done. Like it does, like it definitely does go. It just needs some like time investment. The holds are smaller. So I think I'm planning to try it when I go out in Switzerland, but
nice.
Go out to Switzerland.